Okay, welcome back everybody, and what we want to do for character design, I want to show you guys two basic simple approaches on how to paint your characters, okay? And so we're going to look at a couple different styles really quick. The first artist that I want to show you is Peter DeSev, okay? Peter DeSev, really talented guy. He does cartoon and illustration work for the New Yorker magazine, and he's also been doing conceptual art for many movies over a long period of time. He has a really great, he's done work for Disney Feature, he's done work for Blue Sky, and he has a really great sensibility to his drawing. We'll take a look at some of his work in the beginning of class another day and sketch from it. But what's really important is when you guys, you guys have been doing your creature concepts, or I shouldn't say creature, but your three basic animal shapes that we have, but they are creatures. So you're bringing them to a point where you have to present them to somebody. You don't have to go in and render the heck out of them, because a lot of times there's this double-edged sword, and what happens with that double-edged sword is that they're going to look at it and they're going to revise it, right? Right. So it's not going to be a finish the first time you show it, but then on the other hand, you don't want to just give somebody a line drawing. You want to have a little bit of color underneath so it shows what the character looks like. It gives it a little bit of life. So we've been using sort of two different programs. Some of you guys are drawing with Photoshop. Some of you guys are drawing with Sketchbook Pro. Inside Sketchbook Pro, it has a magnificent set of markers. Okay, so let me come over here, and I'm gonna open up Sketchbook Pro really quick, and I want to show you. So if you've been working, and here's the great thing about Sketchbook Pro. It doesn't matter if you're in Photoshop or not, because your Photoshop file you can save as a TIFF or a PSD. So you can save one of those formats and then open it up inside Sketchbook Pro. And the same thing goes with going back from Sketchbook Pro, going over to Photoshop. The only thing you have to be careful of is that if you happen to have a sketch, a line sketch that was done, when you transfer it over into Photoshop, sometimes it automatically merges the line layer onto a white background. Does that make sense? Okay, I'll show you an example of that. If I click Photoshop, here are a couple sketches that I did one day in class goofing around, right? See what's happened? My line drawing is completely merged to the white of the paper. Well, that can be really bad. That might not work for you. However, though, there's a little bit of a fix for that sometimes, and we'll get to that. There's a Photoshop fix. But back to this really quick. Inside Sketchbook Pro, I really love the software because, as I mentioned before, the pencil really feels like pencil. So if I come over here, and I like to sketch in blue a lot, and part of that's just from being inside the animation industry, just used to drawing in that mode. If I come over here and look, there's my sketches that I was working on the other day, right? So if you look, you can see, look, it's on a separate layer. See that? And the background is right here. So let's see what happens if I save it now with the white turned off, right? So if I come over here and say File, Save As, I'm going to put it here. It's a TIFF format. I'm going to put it on my desktop, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to call these Turtle and then put No BG on it, okay? So I'm going to save that to my desktop. So I'm going to minimize my file really quick, and let's see if it works. I'm going to come over here. We'll come back to Peter in just a second. And if I open up Photoshop, actually it should be right here. There it is, Turtle No BG. I'm going to bring that over, drop it on my Photoshop icon, open it up, and look at what happened. Okay. Problem is my line's a little light. Let's see. Sometimes I've had a little bit of discrepancy. Let me fill it with white. So select all, edit, and I'm going to fill the background with white now. Okay, foreground color, and there it is. Okay, so if you save your line work out of Sketchbook Pro right away and don't turn off the BG, what's going to happen when you get it? It's going to look like this. Your line is going to be completely merged into one layer. Does that make sense?
It gets flattened.
Yeah, it gets flattened. It's taking everything and compressing it. So make sure if you're in Sketchbook, here's the other version I just saved. Where's my line? My line's separate. This saves me a lot of time. However, though, there is a little fix. Some of you might have goofed, and when you were drawing, didn't even think about the white background, and you might have your character and your line work on the same layer. I'll get back to that in a minute, and I'll show you a way around that in Photoshop. Okay. All right. So that's first things first. I wanted to mention that is how to bring the line back and forth so we have just the line, because our goal is to paint underneath the line. Now, since we've talked about that, let's go back over. Let's take a look at the amazing Peter de Sèvres. Okay. What did I do with my little window here? So the great thing about Peter's work that I really like is he has that really soft gestural feel with his line work, and it shows out with the pencil. But then he's really great about squashing and stretching of shape and weight. There's always a lot of weight, and he pulls his shapes as much as he can. But then on the other side of it, I really like how he's coming in with the very light watercolor washes. Okay, so you have two options. Inside Sketchbook Pro, when I was just there a second ago talking about the line, okay, you have these wonderful marker comps here. So if I turn on my layers here, if I go over and add another layer underneath here, this layer up on top is acting as my line. So I technically could come over here right now, underneath here, and I could come over, I could grab one of the marker tabs here, and I could just start throwing in some rough little marker comps here. And the really great thing about these markers is they really feel and act like markers. Okay, they work directly with Copic, and those of you that use Copic for sketching, I like to use them, but I don't use them too much anymore. You know why? They're horribly expensive, right? I mean, they're super expensive, and now with digital software that's totally changed, I can get quite a lot of really fantastic benefits. Okay, so that's the basics of the markers. See how well it works? It's pretty easy. This is on a separate layer, so, and it's also pressure sensitive. I can go very light and I can go very dark like that. Okay, it works just like a real marker. In a minute, I'm going to explain the structure and how you should paint your character. Okay, so let me show you some more samples and then we'll come back. But just really quickly, look at all the different markers that are here. See all the different variations in colors in the Copic option? It's a fantastic way to work. So if you happen to draw your work inside Photoshop, you can still bring it into Sketchbook Pro. Okay, and you can still use this to color your work. So hold on a second, let's jump back and take a look at Peter. Okay, so when you look at Peter's work, this is something he did for Mulan back in the day, right? Do you see the fun sense in there? There's like, it's not just about the draftsmanship and the drawing and part of the line. He doesn't have a real thick line around his work. He has this nice sort of sketchy line, very similar to Carter Goodrich. Remember when we looked at Carter? He was going in there, not thick heavy lines, but sort of, you know, base line around there, lines that came together to make a general shape around the object. And then he comes in and he does this sort of light wash. I think this is a real great gestural way to show your characters to clients, because the looser you are with the color underneath, the more expressive it feels. It's the same principle when I told you guys when you're doing your sketches, you can have them a little tight, but if you can manage to stay, let me turn off my pink turtle, if you manage to stay a little loose with your sketches, a little bit more life comes out of them, right? And we can all sort of pull that out into our own work. We don't have to go in and clean up every line and make it super tight. What happens when we do that? Exactly, it gets rigid, it gets lifeless, and it kills part of the drawing. Okay, so if I come back here and I just take a look at a couple more of Peter's work, look at the lost and found edges, look at how the color comes out. Okay, look at the exaggeration of shapes. Okay, there's so much wonderfulness that's coming out of part of his design quality. Does that guy look familiar? Okay. In another lecture, we can take a look at a whole bunch of his work, but I've met him once, really nice guy. He's at CTN sometimes, so those of you that might be planning to go to CTN, he's been there. I've seen him before at Comic-Con. Okay, he has a couple books out that I would highly recommend that you could check out. They're fantastic, but what I'm getting at here is this marker feel right here and this sort of watercolor look that's happening here. You could come very close to pulling this off with digital. Okay, very close. In fact, this right here, you could absolutely pull off. Okay, so that's the first option I wanted to show you in terms of a way to color your character. Okay, the second option that I want to show you is right here. Okay, this is when we take line and we put a base local color underneath. So what is the base local color? I have on a blue shirt. The local color of this is blue. Okay. Now look at my arm right here. I wear the shirt for a reason. Now I have shadows underneath the wrinkle folds of my shirt. By selecting a lasso and going over those areas in Photoshop, going to levels and darkening them, so that easy. I just select that with a lasso and then go darken it. That's how I create the shadows. And then I have the highlights coming from that light, right? See the highlights on my folds there? Well, those highlights, it's the same thing. I go into my lasso tool and I select those little areas. I go to levels and then I lighten them. It's that simple. Okay, so in some of these, that's one approach to a simple local color. Another approach is you put the local color and then you come back on top of it and you do a gradient pass. So what's a gradient pass? That's when you take a fuzzy brush and let's say you have the red that's right here, and then you hit it with a little bit of like a black on top of it very lightly, and you get a gradient that's happening, a little dark to light gradient. Okay, I don't know if you can see it here, but you see how this local color right there, it's a little bit brighter red, and then you come back down here and this is a little bit darker. Okay, that's one example. Notice what color is the line still? It's black. There's nothing wrong with showing your characters that way. However, if the line is super black, so if you were one of my students that was drawing on your characters and you went in there and put this really thick giant black line around it, well, in the crit I would have nailed you because I would have told you, what did you just do? You flattened your work. Okay? When people get tattoos, one of the things that you have to do is you have to let part of the interior lines read through part of the design. Because what happens, John, if you put a huge line around the outside of something and it's super thick, it flattens part of the image. It's the same principle in graphic design. It's the same principle in entertainment arts or character design. Okay? So now here's a really, sorry this is a little low res, but I like the design. Here's another image that I found online. So this is just simple local color. Okay, there's a little bit of a gradient wash in this character's hair, but the characters themselves are pretty much one local color. There's not even any indication of light or dark side. There's not the indication of a light source coming in from a particular direction. However, though, what they did here, does anyone know?
Looks like a line.
Yep. They changed the line color. They went in and they selected the line and they filled it. Instead of being a black, they changed it to like a light brown, or I shouldn't say light brown. It is a darker color than the rest of the colors on the character. Notice that. That's important. You don't change the color of the line and go lighter than the color of the characters because it doesn't look right. So the outside line is not black. It's more like a darker brown, but it's just a shade or two darker than the interior line weight of the characters. Okay, or excuse me, the interior color of the characters. Okay. Now this is when you get a little bit more advanced. Okay. What's happened here, and if you want to go for this, go for it. It's a little bit harder. This is when you filled enough value under the character in local color to get a visual read, and then you lose the line completely. There's no line on top of that character anymore. Okay? There's a little bit of line around part of the outside of the character. Oops. Let me zoom in a little bit. So if you look, for example, on the hair, there's a couple lines there. Look, there's a little bit of a dark shadow there holding it together. If we come down here, there's a little bit of line underneath part of that shirt. But the line of that shirt is a darker version of the shirt itself, right? So that is the local value. That's why white and black are not colors. Technically, white and black are tints and shades. So if you take a local color, like my arm, again, like blue, and I add a little bit of black to it, I get the shadows. Add a little bit of white to it, I get the highlights. Okay? That's how you have to think of your characters. Now, if you decide to just do something like this, I totally support it. That's a great looking character. Okay? Simple colors in there. There's no indication. Well, there's a little bit of a shadow indication. If you look right here, you see how light that is, and then there's a little bit of a dark shadow there. So that person just on the shirt took a line and selected that edge and darkened it. Okay? However, though, the line around the shirt is black, right? And then when we come over to the character, what color is the line? It's more of a darker skin color around the character. If you want to get into that detail, go for it. If you want to experiment, try it. That's more advanced. I'm not asking you to do that, but what I am asking you to do is give me a general base local value color underneath your line. That's going to make it pop off the page. Okay. Some of you might not have had any experience with color. Okay. Try to avoid really saturated colors. So what is a saturated color? Well, thankfully the Photoshop has this picked out for us. If I bring open the color picker right here, okay, that's a saturated color. You see the color light up right there? Okay. If you grew up in the 80s, that's what people wore right there. Green like that. Okay. All right. Or they had super bright orange like that. Pure saturation. We don't, unless your character is specifically saturated, like maybe he's a turtle and he has toxic waste around him and he has little orange spots, that might be different. Okay, we don't need to get in and oversaturate our characters. Over here is the pastel side. This right here tends to be a good range from about here in the middle down to about here. Okay, over here is the soft pastels. There's more white added in to the local color. So you have to understand, this right here is the local color right there. If I tap it in the middle, that represents the local color. If I were to go into that local color and make it the hue, make it really, really oversaturated, okay, it's going to make it really bright, it gets to that. If I add a little bit more black into the color, I'm bringing my little picker down. So that means if I decide that one of my characters, let's say your cat had a shirt on it, and it's an orange shirt, I pick that color, that's fine, that's the base color of the shirt. Then you want to go and you want to put some shadows in. You take your lasso tool and you select underneath part of that and then you darken it. Two ways to darken it. One is you bring up the color picker like this and then you just automatically adjust it and move it down. Or two, you can go to Control L, which is levels, and you can select it and darken it. Okay? All right, so let's say I decide to paint my character the other method, the second way, and instead of doing like the watercolor approach. So what I basically have to do, let me see if I can do this guy right here. Okay, I'm going to come over here, and you have two options on how you can paint him. Well, number one, I could take the lasso tool really quick, and I could go along the outside and select part of my character. This is something that I prefer to do, but I've been using the lasso tool for a while. And I find it more efficient. Okay, so look, I did the base of his face right there. Let's say you accidentally go over something that you didn't want to get it in. Well, you have by holding down Shift, you have the plus, which allows you to add to your selection. So now I could come in here and I could add part of this base in here. That little, I don't know what it is, seaweed element in there. And let's say you go, oh no, I selected that, I don't want that. If I hold down Alt, I can now come back over and go over part of my character and I can deselect an area that I didn't want to select, okay? So that's one way that you could do. You could literally get in there and do this. It takes a little bit of time, but you can get in there. And now what I can do, hold on, let me get the rest of this little slime piece right here. Okay, so let's say I have that and I want to paint that part of my character. I can come over here. I can select a color. Let's say I'm imagining my turtle is this sort of, I don't know, maybe a green about like here, okay? Something about there, okay? So you can either fill it by going under Edit and go to Fill and Foreground Color, and there he is, he's filled, okay? Or you can go in there and paint it. Now, I have a buddy of mine that works. When he works, this is how he paints. He takes a base brush, okay, like this, and he just, oops, hold on a minute. And on brush. And why am I, that's why. I was on paint all layers, I believe. Okay, this is how my buddy works. He just comes along with his brush and he goes like this. And he just paints under the character. And he does it really fast. He's pretty efficient. I had a fuzzy brush there, which was bad. He just comes in and he can stay in the lines like this. But what he does at the very end is he zooms in like this, where it's really pixelated, and he goes back and he picks his eraser, picks a nice solid round, not a fuzzy, a solid round eraser, and then what he does is he comes along, hold on a minute, I got to touch off to something there to to get rid of it. There, I got to resize it because now I'm zoomed in. What he does is he comes in like this and he just erases really quickly around. Now, I did something right there. What did Phil just do? I painted on the background layer. How come I don't want to paint on the background layer? Because now if I erase anything, I'm erasing the white of it, which is still fine. But it's easier if you paint on a layer in between. Why? In Photoshop, you can quickly go in and adjust the hue and the feel of a particular color. However, though, okay, what I'm going to do right now, let's say you did do that by accident. Well, look, I could still come in here, and I can do what my buddy Joe does, is he goes like this. He gets really close to the pixels, and he actually holds Shift. And Shift makes a straight line. And so he just goes around and touches around the character like that. And he does it really quickly, and he gets rid of all that overspray. So he can come in here like this. Oops. Sorry, it jumped there. Let me back up. So look, if I touch here first, like right in here, and I just hold Shift, I just come along and just touch along like that. See that? And it's just making a straight line every time I connect.
So it actually sees the line and moves around.
Doesn't see the line, but I'm tapping. So watch what happens if I tap John at a further distance. It does a straight line, right? But see, when I'm zoomed in real close like that, and I'm up on pixels, I can quickly go like this and go.
And you like just sketch it.
Yeah, I'm just touching it, touch, moving an inch at a time. But you see how fast I just moved along and cleaned up part of the shape of my character? Because a lot of times we all make mistakes. We forget what layer we're on, and we accidentally go over, and we have overspray. So that's a great way to get rid of it. Because see, I'm zoomed in so close, I see the pixels, but then when I zoom out, see the difference? I now have a nice tight line around my character. Okay, so if you do that little accident there, and I did that on purpose, painted on that layer, okay? Here's one way you can fix it. One is that you come over here and you select, put another layer on the bottom, select all, edit. I'm going to fill that lower layer again. Okay. Boom. Now it's filled. Then I'm going to come back to this layer. Okay. I'm going to turn this one off. I'm going to go under select. Okay. And go to color range. And I'm just going to touch the white like that. What it did is it just selected all the white inside the whole entire image for me on that layer. And I hit delete, I turn it off, and if I come back here now and turn this on, so the only other color I have in here is the overspray on that layer. Okay, so if I come back here and erase this really quick, basically this layer is now just the green. You see how I did that? That's how I separated the white really quick from it, using the selection tool there. Okay, the reason why this is so cool with characters is that if I go to Control H, which none of the hotkeys are working on here. I'm sorry, let me bring this down smaller so it fits in the window. So if I come over here, none of my hotkeys seem to be working. So if I go under Image, Adjustments, and I go down, oh, it's Control U on here. Hue and Saturation. Since my local color is on a separate layer, what does that mean I can do to it now? I could change it very easily. That's a great feature in Photoshop, because I can look at my colors and go, he's too green. Whoa, now he's super saturated. Pull back the saturation. Maybe I want to make him a little bit grayer. Okay? You see what a huge advantage that is for me? Is I could quickly get in and I could modify part of my characters. Now, this is what I would heavily recommend for you to do. Okay? Let me zoom in on the face so I don't have to get on the whole body of my character here. So let's say I'm painting my character right now. Okay? My line layer is on top. If I go in there and start adding some more details for the teeth or the eyes or some shadows, I can start to lower down my line and see how the character reads. So I can do that by coming up here and I just select under my opacity and I lower the opacity of the line. See that? So now the color of the character is pretty much popping through and I've changed the general feel. Now, remember in one of the samples I showed you over here, how they were putting a light side and a dark side to the character, right? If you want to do that, this is how easy it is. You can come into your character, you can take your lasso tool, and what I can do, now this is where I want you to go back really quick and label your layers. You have to have them labeled. That's my local color, because I'm going to nab you on this. If I'm going to walk around today You're going to be coloring. I'm going to look over and someone's going to have 20 layers and none of them are labeled. I'm going to jump on you. Okay? What's this top one right here? If I could type right, that's my line layer. So I have line, I have local color underneath it. Okay? Back here, what's that? BG, that's white. Okay? I don't like, well, let me come back to this now. I don't like painting on white. Why? White's the color of highlights. I hate painting on white. Personal preference. If you want to do some white for us, that's totally fine. But if you decide to put a highlight on your character, like on the shoulder or the eye or on the nose, guess what's going to happen? It's going to blend in with the white background and it won't look right. So that's why what a lot of artists do is they come in and we will usually drop like a gradient background, a very light tone color like this. Excuse me, let me get the rectangular mass. They'll come in and do something like this. And they'll put a mass like that, and what we'll do is we'll fill that with a really base gray. And it could be either a cold gray or a little bit warm gray like that. But nothing, but something light. Nothing down here or over here. That would be way too strong, right? Something very light like this. So here, right about there, I have a warm gray. Okay? So if I come under and go edit, and I go fill, okay, I have this warm gray color that comes sort of underneath, okay, that could come through. Now, I'm having a problem with my line sort of reading through there, okay, on the way that it's presented right now. So depending on how your line is, because I lined up my line quite a bit, I'm getting that little, well, that's because on this one I separated the white out, right, with that selection mode, and there's a little bit of line that's still under there, okay. If you have your line completely separated, okay, like I did earlier, you can get the gradient right under there completely, okay. So you don't have to do that. That's just a personal choice. Or another option is you work like on a toned piece of paper. So you load the whole piece of image. When you're drawing, you keep that tone so you can put base colors and it allows the color to jump off the page a little bit. Okay, all right, so back to, let me jump in here. I label everything. This is really important. If you decide to come in here, let's say I want to start putting shadows on my characters, right? If you decide to come in here, what is the negative if I decide to come in here and say, well, that's going to be dark, part of my jaw is going to be dark, maybe the lower part of that tooth, and maybe part of his face in here is going to be dark. There's two ways you can do those shadows. You can select it right now, and if I go into levels right now by hitting Control L in Photoshop, it brings up this level adjustment. If I slide this to the right, what did I just do? I darkened it and created a shadow. However, though, you'll notice it's all on the one layer. If for any reason I decided to change that, I would have to go back, paint over everything, retouch up the line. So what I prefer to do is I have the local color. I prefer to put a layer on top, and I call it shadows. And I prefer then to put another layer up on top of that, and I might call it gradient or textures. Okay, that way everything's on just 3 layers. I have a local color of the character, and then I have the shadow. So let me explain. So instead of doing this, I'm going to hit cancel, because if I, well, let me hit OK and show you. Now the problem is that layer is completely changed. Okay, so it's easier, now I'm going to hit Command Z, for me to select the area that I want, create a new layer above it, and call this shadows. Okay, now what I can do, let me take off that little strip right there. Okay, now, well, there's 2 things I can do. How do I fill that with a darker color? Well, I can come over, open up the color picker, swab that color, and then I could drop it down a little bit like that, right? Okay. And then if I do that, now I can just say edit fill and go to fill, and boom, there's that shadow color now, right? See how easy that was? But look, it's on a separate layer. And the thing I like having it on a separate layer, here's the best part. If I want to blend in that shadow transition, I can come back to my eraser. I can pick a fuzzy brush like this, and now I can go along here and I can erase part of the shadow And see that? I just got a nice blend of that shadow wrapping around the character. Okay? If you have time, you can do it that way. It's up to you. I would advise it's not a good idea to put all your color on one layer. Why? You can't ever adjust it. Because now if I'm working, let's say I show it to, let's say I'm working here, and I show it to Anto, and Anto takes a look at it and goes, you know, turtles don't really look that green and they should be a little bit darker. Well, guess what I can do now? I can come in here and I can quickly go to my local color and I can make them darker within a second, right? And then I can come here, select the shadow, and then I can darken the shadow within a second. I can't do that when everything is merged onto one layer, okay? It's impossible for me to do that. Huh?
Probably group it too to help.
Yeah, if I wanted to, I could create another group or put another file folder up there. It's up to you. But I get used to working like this at home. This is how I do everything, even into the large scale environments, okay? And then, oops, I meant to put in an S there. So there's high. So this is what you should have in your setup. And I know I'm going to nail somebody on this because I'm already looking around and I had somebody sleeping earlier. And then I have somebody drawing on their monitor, not paying any attention. And I know I'm going to walk around, and I'm going to look, and I'm going to go, where's your layers? And they're going to go, what are you talking about? I was listening during the lecture. And I'm going to look, and there's not going to be a local color. There's not going to be a shadow. There's not going to be a high. And what's going to happen, it happens every semester. Someone has all of this on the line layer. They have all the color, the highlights, and someone's working on everything on the line layer. Why would that be a bad no-no? Because you can't ever adjust anything when it's all smacked on one layer. That's a stupid way to work. Now, really quick, I need to take this off. If you sketched in blue like I did, and you have blue line like that, my line layer is separate. You want to change the color of your line, okay? There's a couple ways you can do that that's very efficiently. One, if I want to go down and if I want to turn this into black line, all I have to do is go to Hue and Saturation, which is under Image Adjustments in Photoshop. I pull up Hue and I knock down the saturation and I strip out the color, and then I come in here and I darken the line like this. That's how you turn it into black line. Okay, does that make sense? Some of you sketching, I love sketching in color because black can be boring sometimes, right? However, though, here's something else you could do if you want to get really technical. If you hit Control-All, if your line's separated, I hit Control-All, and let me minimize this, which just put a selection around my whole entire layer. I hit V, which is the Move tool in Photoshop, and I hit an arrow button. And what it just did is it selected my whole entire selection of what's on that layer for me. Now remember, the line layer is separate. See? Now, I can put another layer in. Okay, I turned off my line. I could come over here. Remember that was going to be the color of my turtle? I can I can't talk. I can now go down and pick a darker color. I can come under here and go edit, and I can go fill. Okay. Now, it filled it, you can't see it, but it is that darker color. Sometimes, because the line's so small, you can't quite get the read of that color, right? So what I can do is duplicate the layer. All right. And if you look, and I merge those two together, that is that, if we zoom in there, that color is that dark color I just picked right there. It's that dark green. So now that it's a color, I can easily come into Hue and Saturation, and I can change the color. See that? I can put it into blue. I can change them into there. I can move them across. If I wanted to, let's say my character had an orange shirt on, okay? Select all. Actually, you can even do this. Take the lasso tool, and you can select. Hold on a minute. Deselect. Let's say I wanted this part of my character to be orange. That line only. I select it. I hit the Move tool. I hit the arrows. Now be careful when I hit the arrows. I slightly moved it down, but then I hit it back and it goes right back. There's another hotkey that some advertising people and Photoshop masters know to just make the selection. But now I have that selected. If If I wanted to here, I could go to orange. I could take my brush. And here's the next great thing, is that. There. Let me deselect. See what I just did? I painted a part of my character orange, now part of the line. So if you happen to have a character and you wanted to get really touchy with it, you could have a color for the head, you could have a color for the shell, and then you could put local colors underneath. You don't have to do that. I'm not saying that's required. I'm trying to show you the option of how you could change the line of the character. Okay? Now, let me back up there. Let's say you're one of my students who's new to Photoshop, and you accidentally drew with your line layer merged onto one layer like that. And hold on, let me put it into black. Let's say you have this. Wait, hold on there. I did a mistake there. My bad. Let's say you had black and you weren't paying attention and you accidentally, this happens all the time, you have a sketch you really like of a character, but you've merged that onto the line. Well, Photoshop, we have this wonderful option where we can take that and we can put it onto multiply, which is a layer setting. Okay, so if I grab my line and I put it up on the top there, okay, now hold on a minute. I want to fill, I need to put another background layer there. Edit, fill, and let's go to foreground. Nope, hold on. Let's go to white again. Okay, so let's say your character is on that top line layer. If you select this guy and then come over here on the layer and put it on multiply, it's going to act as a see-through layer. So watch what happens when I turn on the color. Oops. See that? The local color shines through the line. So if you accidentally merged your file and saved it and merged all your layers together, it's not game over. You're still playing in the game, okay? Because you can still save it. All you have to do is go in there and go up to that line layer and put it on to multiply. And this allows me then to come in here, and I can even put my shadows on my character. I can get in there and put my highlights on. I can do everything else that I wanted to, as long as the top layer is on multiply. If it's not on multiply, look what happens. I put it on normal, it whites it out. Why? Multiply tells it to become see-through. So you have all these different options here.
Is it okay to gray tone it and then overlay it?
Yeah, if you like to, if that's how you like to work, absolutely. That's how a lot of artists work with environments, is they create them all in tone first, and they come over with overlay, hue and saturation layers, and then they color it. That's a completely legitimate way to work, okay? A little bit more advanced for some people, but if that's the way you see things, go for it. I actually do that with environments. I paint my environments in tone real quick, and I come back and I throw color washes on top, and then I start painting on top, because that's actually how the old masters were all trained. Okay, so that's really key right here, right, on multiply, just in case that happened. So let me go through. There's quite a bit of information that we talked about today, right? One is you have two options to color your characters. One is you can do like a watercolor wash underneath, okay, which can use the Copic markers, or you can grab a watercolor brush in Photoshop. If you don't have a watercolor brush, there are a couple in here that are really nice. If you want to load them, what you do is you come over here, you right click on B, you come over here, and if you click on this little icon on the right here and you go load brushes, right, actually don't even need to load them, right underneath here you have these brushes here called natural brushes 2. If you pick these up right here, hit append, there's, this one's one of my favorite right here, these two, right, this one right here. It gives you a nice feel. Here, let me show you. I come over here, a second, brush, select that guy here. There it is, sorry, I had cap locks on. By the way, if you hit caps lock, it gives you that little target. I don't like to use it, I like to see my brush. Okay, so let me show you what, See, this gives you a very soft sort of feel, and it allows you to get that soft. So watch, if I were to go like that and then go a little darker, let's say some of these brushes, see it has that sort of watercolor feel in it. Can you see that in there? It's one of the natural brushes that's in Photoshop. It can work very well. It can give you that look very similar to what Peter de Sèvres looked like. Okay, so anyway, you undo that. So you have a couple options on how to color them. You can color them in Sketchbook Pro with the Copic markers if you want. Totally valid option. If you want to bring them into Photoshop, you can go, depending on how you saved your file, you can go underneath the line. Okay. You can put the top layer on multiply, or hopefully you drew with line layers separate. That way you can quickly bring it in separate and then load it up that way. And then your line you can adjust the color of, you can change it. I went over all that in today's demo. Okay, so I want to give you the rest of class to work. I'm going to render this. I will load it up onto YouTube, and then I will link it to the class blog for your assignment. Okay, and then what we'll do is, actually not this class, because this is our first assignment. I want to move on to another assignment. Later on, there's a third approach. So if you notice in today's lecture, the beginning of it, I indicated 2 ways to paint your characters, which I should have said quickly, right? And one is just the Copic marker approach really quick, this watercolor approach with a watercolor brush, or just filling it with local color. That's it. That's simple. Later on, when we get to a rendering stage, there's all different types of approaches where you can get in there with really cool brushes and you can start rendering, putting highlights and coarse shadows, using smudge brushes, using texture options, using texture gradients and layers. That's a whole nother lecture, because that's going to take at least a good 30 minutes to an hour to put into a lecture. Okay, that's a little bit more advanced. All right, so anyway, have fun with your characters, and if you have any questions, let me know. Thank you.